Welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. This is Adam Strutz. And if you've been following this podcast for some time, you would know that this podcast is especially focused in talking about issues relating to South Africa at large, but also the work that the various institutions of the Solidarity movement are involved with. For today's episode, we're going to talk about broader South African issues. And I have to be honest, as I'm sitting here, not quite sure what we will be talking about. But our guest today is Penuel The Black Pen. Welcome.
Meneer Roots, thank you so much.
Well, just for the viewers, so over the weekend, actually last night, we sent each other some WhatsApps with voice notes and some ideas on what to discuss. And we decided that I'm not going to sit here with a piece of paper with questions. So we have some ideas on topics that we want to get to. But if we don't get to that, we'll go to wherever the conversation takes us. But is it accurate to describe you as a social media sensation in South Africa, an activist? How would you? That's just tongue in cheek.
So we're here to lie to people. Jeez, we're starting off with lies. So I'm a podcaster on social media. A lot of people, especially when I go to rugby games, say die mannetjie van TikTok. So a lot of people know me from TikTok as well with our short clips.
You're very big on TikTok.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm big on TikTok than other platforms. I had the pleasure of obviously interviewing you, I think 2 years ago with DJ Sbu.
Yes.
That was really brilliant, and it was a game changer for so many different people in different segments. I've had the pleasure of your next door neighbors, AfriForum, speaking to Ernst van Zyl, and meeting so many people. And the beauty of the people that follow you guys, listening to me, and the beauty of people that follow me, listening to you guys, has been a game changer in what is meant to be nation building. You'd think our politicians are meant to be doing that, but they're not. And the work that we've done sitting down and tackling hard issues, like the difficult conversations, I think has been really, really awesome. So
tell me, maybe just for a start, to sort of set the table about your story.
Yeah.
Where do you come from? You speak fluent Afrikaans, but you didn't go to an Afrikaans school.
Yes.
Just tell us a bit about that and your Afrikaans, but also your background. How should people make sense of who you are?
No, my Afrikaans used to be very savor and float, but now it's hustling. The data bundles are finished. I went to Word School Newcastle High School in KZN. In Newcastle, I finished there, and then I went to Rhodes University in Grahamstown. It's known as Makanda today. And then I moved to the University of Johannesburg to do my honors in accounting. The plan was to become a chartered accountant and to see how that goes. I never wanted to do that. I did that for my mom. I'd go and work in banking for a couple of years. And then when I was brave enough, I jumped out, went to entrepreneurship, lost a lot of money, but learned a lot about myself. And then I think just before COVID and during COVID, everyone was at home. So a lot of us were making content. I've been reading books, speaking to people, meeting people, and I thought it was time for me to lift my voice up and share my thoughts. And I've been doing that more aggressively since end of 2021. And then I started podcasting with DJ Sbu, and then I started the Penuels show in August 2022. And since then, I've been podcasting, meeting a lot of cool people, traveling around the world, around the country. And I think in a nutshell, that's me. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because a few years ago, hardly anyone or very few people knew who you were, and you had this incredible rise over the last few years or months, where you have all these people following now, listening to your opinions and so forth. And I don't know if this is a compliment or not, so so you can decide. But something about you that strikes me is what makes you different than many other commentators is sometimes it's hard to predict what your opinion is going to be on something. Because broadly speaking, you can, if you know what a person's position is on whatever issue, BEE, for example, or many of the issues in America, like, borders or whatever, you can pretty much predict what their positions are going to be on other things, because people tend to be in certain categories, you could say, ideologically. But with you, sometimes we would have a conversation and we would be 100% in agreement. And then the next day I would see you tweet something and I would be like, but is this the same guy that I spoke with yesterday? So do you have a frame of reference? What do you make of this phenomenon?
Geez, that's tough. That's really tough. So I'm in a lonely space of, is it called the middle center? Because you've got the right and the left.
Yeah.
You never know. I'm in a very lonely space where I understand everyone. I understand everyone's story and everyone's struggle. You know, we can speak about black people and we want the land. And then you listen to the Afrikaners and the Voortrekkers and those stories. You listen to some of the British English people and how they speak. You listen to the Indians and the Coloureds. I empathize and I understand. And what becomes tough is based on the day, based on the mood, based on a story that's trending, I will tweet or I'll speak on behalf of, or because I'm triggered on behalf of certain people. So in this country, because everything is black and white, according to politics and social media, if I say something nice about white people, I'm a sellout. If I say something nice about black people and I support them on certain issues, all of a sudden it's like, but do you not understand the complexities? So you find yourself in a very lonely space where I understand everyone. And because I understand everyone, it's almost like no one, you don't belong in any category. So I try to lend my voice to various issues. In different ways, I try to show both sides, especially when there's like an aggressive one side. I try to come in, maybe you'd call it playing devil's advocate, to be like, but have you considered this? And then when people see that, they just assume I'm just pissing against the wind or I'm just being controversial for no reason. But we're not trying to understand each other in this country. And that's why we can't build the way we'd like to. I think it's one of the things we spoke about even yesterday. I wanted to ask you, do you think this whole Rainbow Nation thing works? Do we progress trying to integrate and work together, or do we develop better segmenting? Of course, when you start saying this, people are like, you want apartheid again. But people are not seeing each other. They're not meeting each other. And when they get into rooms, you assume they'll find each other and they just don't. And that makes me sad. And I speak about these things and they end up upsetting someone, somewhere.
Yeah, well, if that's a question, it's a difficult question to answer because at least experience over the past few decades seems to show that it's not working.
Yeah.
I think there are very few people left in South Africa who think, this is working.
Sure. Well, Springbok supporters when the Springboks are playing.
Yeah, okay.
But that's the only time.
Yeah. And when they have to pay taxes, SARS is working. You can see the revenue service is doing their job. I think the question is not so much is the country working. The question is, to be very pessimistic, the question is why is it not working? And I think you mentioned this now, that there are different opinions and different interpretations, also depending on where you come from.
Yeah.
And I do think, and this is, I've been thinking about this for some time, is talking about history in South Africa. In a certain sense, we're obsessed with history, but I almost want to say that we don't talk about history enough. And what I mean by that is we sort of cherry pick certain things from the past to build our narratives around that.
The history is very selective.
Yes, and I had a discussion the other day with Bafana Modise, a Heritage Day conversation, just about the Afrikaner story. And I thought that was very delightful for me to sort of tell the story, and he didn't confront me. He asked some difficult questions. Obviously, there's a lot to confront in the Afrikaner story.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we were able to have a conversation about history, and in that conversation, at least, with the primary goal of trying to understand as opposed to trying to attack.
Yes.
I think that's probably one of the reasons why I think things are not working. Is we're sort of listening to each other, not with the intention of trying to understand what that person is saying or where that person is coming from, but waiting for that person to make some mistake or say something along the lines that you can go for. And so I don't see that there's much of an effort being made, or enough effort being made to understand each other's.
But do you think we should? Do you think we should be trying to understand each other? Should we just respect each other? Do your thing, I'll do my thing, and then we'll work together where we need to. But then go back to your place, I'll go back to mine.
No, I think we should. No, we should definitely try and understand each other. But I do think the way it's approached. So from an Afrikaner perspective, there's a lot of Afrikaners, including myself, have become somewhat uncomfortable with a certain variation or a certain strand of what we call South Africanism.
Okay.
Because there's that, I think in your conversation with Ernst van Zyl, he mentioned the slogan, for the nation to prosper, the tribe must die.
Yeah.
So there's this sentiment that we see coming from some people, unfortunately many of them in government or the ruling party. They have this idea that the only way for South Africa to work is for different communities and the different cultures and so forth that form part of South Africa. They should put the past behind them, their past and their identity, and they should shake off who they are culturally, yes. And they should become this void and then adopt this new identity.
Yes.
So it's, and I've heard people say this to me explicitly, that you should stop with this Afrikaner nonsense, stop with this Afrikaans thing, we are all South Africans. Now it's one thing to say we're all South Africans, but it's a totally different thing to say we are all South Africans and we have to be all South Africans, and the condition for that has to be that you must stop being who you are.
Yeah.
Because that leads to a backlash. And then people say, well, I want to be part of this thing, but if I can only be part of this thing by rejecting this very part of my identity, then you go into backlash and you say, well, then I'm going to cherish my identity.
Yeah.
And so I think the problem, if the question is, can the Rainbow Nation work? I'm inclined to say no, but when I say no, the reason why I say no is if our conception of a Rainbow Nation is one in which we have to pretend that we are something that we are not.
Yeah.
If Rainbow Nation, and I know that's a very ideological term, but if Rainbow Nation implies we recognize diversity for what it actually is,
okay.
And we're not trying to force people into something else, then perhaps it can work.
Sure.
But do you agree? Do you think it can work or not?
I was hoping you'd answer all the tough questions and I'll answer the easy ones, like where are you from? And I'm conflicted. So this is where you say, I'll tweet this today, and then tomorrow I say something else. For a very long time growing up, I was idealistic. A lot of us are very idealistic. You know, you get sold the story of Nelson Mandela, forgiveness, Rainbow Nation, unity. We want to build this country. And then as time goes on, as you get older, you start looking at the cracks, because it's very nice to whitewash. America is a good example of this. They sell the story to the whole world that America is this beautiful place. But when you start getting into the nitty-gritties of America, it's split. It's fractured in many ways, and they've got a lot of problems.
In some ways, America is more divided than South Africa.
I can agree with that, when you actually do a deep dive that people don't do. There's a lot of trauma that many people are carrying. Some of the trauma is fresh. Some of the trauma is a bit older. So Afrikaner trauma comes from maybe the British. So that becomes a bit older, and the Afrikaners try to do something about it to remedy. Black trauma might be a bit more new. So because of that, they still are going through pain. And then the question becomes, are they doing something towards it? And you look at the politicians we have, and it feels like we're not, as a nation and as black people. You're very right when you quote Ernst van Zyl to say, look, if you want to build a nation, the tribe must fall. I think it happens with Springbok culture. I love the Springboks. They are a world champion team. Everyone loves the Springboks. But they have a culture. And you can see even in the way their players are. Someone was asking the other day, do you need to be married to be a Springbok? Do you need to be able to speak Afrikaans? And we can joke about it, but there's some merit to that. The guys will tell you they love braais. The guys will all tell you they're Christian. So you start picking up...
the Springboks?
The Springbok rugby team, sorry. You start realizing that there is a culture of sorts here, and that's why it works. And if someone else was to come into that setup with their own ideals and thoughts, and the sport is too rough, why are we tackling each other? This is barbaric. You're like, hey, that's not the culture here. And you're like, but we must be united. We want female players on the team. Why can't I be a female Springbok? And you're like, oh, we want gender equality. I also want to get tackled. And you're like, oh, okay, this is tough. So when you look at it from a country perspective, we have a lot of traumas we haven't addressed correctly. The politicians, of course, we speak about this all the time. They race bait when it suits their agenda. Part of the reason I've admired Solidariteit, AfriForum, why I went to visit Orania, was because I was trying to find people that are doing work. Complain, blame anyone you want, but show that you're doing work. Don't just, like the ANC Youth League recently, take 20,000 unemployed youth and march to the JSE and demand jobs. It doesn't work like that, but...
The JSE is not going to give you jobs.
So we have this country that's built like that, and we were sold a story. It was a cute story, but it wasn't practical. For the Springboks, as an example, going back to rugby, I'm sorry to reference rugby. For the Springboks to become strong, we need strong rugby unions. The Blue Bulls must want to destroy Western Province. When you do a deeper dive, the schools, if you look at the biggest derby in the world, Palchem, Paul Boys High, when you look at Grey Bloom and Paul Ruiz, these schools go at each other hard. They proudly wear their badge. There's a respect. We respect each other, but we want to beat you, and it makes us stronger. And you almost wish, if we were sold something in this country, it's like, be proudly and passionately yourself, build, but then respect others. Don't necessarily look to integrate and lose who you are. That could work. You look at the Muslims and the Jews in this country as an example. They preserve their cultures and their beliefs, but they respect others. If we actually want to build one nation, we are all going to have to compromise. The problem then becomes compromise to what? And the reality is we end up doing what we're doing now. Jy's 'n Afrikaner man, I'm a Zulu boy, but we're speaking English. So are we compromising back to British colonialism? Are we compromising to what America wants? Is that even African anymore? Because now we're not wearing veldskoene, we're not braaiing, we're like, no, we all had to let go of that. And you're like, but what we're doing is we're not doing what is for us, and who decides that? And that becomes very difficult.
Can I link to that? Because you touched on something that is almost a sore point to the Afrikaner people or the Afrikaans-speaking community, is this issue of cultural diversity and language diversity. So we are very proud of Afrikaans, the Afrikaans language, the depth of literature and everything, the fact that it's a scientific language. And we want to preserve that, and we want to have education in Afrikaans. We want people to be able to study in Afrikaans. And unfortunately, we don't have that. We don't have the same phenomenon with the other indigenous languages.
100%.
So there's some talk about Zulu education at the University of KZN and so forth. But a lot of, and to put it very bluntly, a lot of young black people opt to study in English.
Yes.
When the percentage of young Afrikaans people who want to study in their own language is much higher. Now, part of the reason is the Afrikaans language is more developed as a scientific language. But this leads to some form of a conundrum for us, because the solution to us is to say we need to develop mother tongue education. We need to get these other languages up to par. We need to have, children should be able to study in their own language and so forth as well. But that then gets interpreted as, oh, we see what you're actually trying to do. You're actually trying to make sure that people are separated and so forth. So it's almost a lose-lose. You have to, you should either be some form of a separatist, or you should be willing to lose your language.
Yeah.
And it's, you can't choose an option that is not controversial or that would not lead to some form of friction.
That's to people that are not solution-oriented. There are people that have a problem for every solution. You're like, okay, guys, here's the land. Yeah, but we don't want this land. We want that land.
Yeah.
Okay, you can have that land. Yeah, but we need money.
Yeah.
Okay, here's some money. Yeah, but we don't have access to market. And you're like, okay, so you've got a problem for every single solution. We've got solutions for you. You don't want them. We're saying, here's an economy that was built by whoever, the Afrikaner community. If you want to participate in this economy, learn Afrikaans. Go to Soltech, learn a skill, and then you can work here. No, we don't want Afrikaans. Okay, then let's help you develop your own thing. No, but we don't have an economy. Okay, I don't know what you want from us, right? So I will say this on a platform, then it will be, there he is defending his white people, etc. But it's a pragmatic conversation. That what is it that you claim that you want? And the sad thing that I've come to accept about, I think, most human beings, they will go with whatever's the loudest speaker. By speaker, I mean megaphone. So if it's a politician, if it's a celebrity, they will go with that. And human beings are highly emotional. So if you sell them an emotional narrative, that becomes what they go with. And it's always easy to point fingers at a villain. One of the ministers, I think last year, if it was not Tulindiwe Zulu, I think buildings collapsed or buildings were burning, and she was like, it's apartheid. Yeah. And you're like, this is wild. These are buildings you guys were meant to maintain and make sure, and it's like, you always have to have a villain, and it's not going to be you, and you're going to use emotions. So people aren't into solutions. Black people in particular in this country are not having the right conversations. If we want to preserve indigenous language, languages, isiZulu, Sesotho, Sepedi, etc. In the global modern world we live in, languages thrive where there is a material benefit. So I'll use maybe the taxi industry as an example. The taxi industry is majority Zulu. That's why people will tell you if they're not Zulu that, Zulu taxi drivers are so rude. When you go there, you don't speak Zulu, they ignore you. It's almost the same you'd say about, this Afrikaans farmer, I spoke to him and he started speaking Afrikaans. This industry has a language. Same way if you want to go to America, you need to speak English. If you want to go and do business in Germany, if you want to go and do business in China, there's a language that they have. If Black South Africans want to preserve their languages, at least in the modern world, they must then build economies around those languages. And if they're not willing to do that hard work, they will revert to English, but then they don't bash English. They'll bash the next person, which is why I also always found it funny that in June 76, black kids were fighting against Afrikaans, but not against English. They've never marched to say we don't want to learn English, but they marched against Afrikaans. And for me, I think at that time it was whoever was running the Afrikaner program didn't do a good job. You were meant to do it like in a softer way to get people to buy up. But yeah, it's a complicated one and we could go on forever. And I don't have an answer for you in terms of rainbow or people focusing on their cultures.
Yeah, but okay, so I want to get to this. We touched on this just before we started recording, but let's call it the phenomenon of social media before we get to podcasting. There's that line in the movie Gladiator when the empress, I think, says, or the princess or whatever role she was playing, said that the mob is fickle. And it's strange to observe, and we know that social media is not real life, but to me it's becoming increasingly strange to observe the difference between what you see on X or social media in comment sections and what you see in real life.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, as I'm sitting here, I cannot think ever having experienced racism from a black person towards me or some negative feelings for being white, except of course through work when you go to a court case and when you go to a Kiel the Boer court case, you'll get that. But going to the shopping mall, you never experience that. Yeah. But I mean, I can go on my X account today and I can guarantee you if I look at my mentions, someone would say something like that. And this is about what you spoke about, the megaphone or the speaker. It's strange to see how impressionable people seem to be on social media, where someone could say something controversial and then the whole crowd gets riled up. But it doesn't really link up to real life. So how do we make sense of that? Is it because people actually think like that, but they don't behave like that in real life? Or is it because social media just brings out the worst in people?
So social media doesn't bring out the worst in people. I think Twitter/X, specifically that platform, for some reason, almost rewards this vile type of confrontational engagement. There are other platforms that are not as vile, in my opinion. I really thought social media would shift the world more aggressively. It's shifted a lot of people, it's held people to account, people have been fired, and definitely. But to what you're saying, it is not a representation of real life. I don't know if people use Twitter and X to vent. Maybe that's one of the things. It's like I've got these thoughts, and this is the one platform that allows me to. It's like going into a garage or going to your pillow and just screaming. And it's like, well, I don't scream all the time. My pillow would be like, this guy must be angry. He always comes to me to scream in me, and you're like, oh, it's just when I'm angry, but out there I'm laughing. So I don't know if it's used as a therapy platform, as a platform for people to share alternative thoughts. The other problem with Twitter in particular is Twitter might be the only platform where you can throw a stone at an influential person and it lands and they react. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, I don't think there's another platform where a celebrity or known person can actually respond to you.
But then, just to add, is if you want to throw a stone to an influential person, you have to make sure that you throw it properly. So in other words, you have to be almost overly aggressive or antagonistic.
You have to hit them hard. Otherwise, if you just, Aaron, thank you for the work, you just go past that. Baranki, what?
Or even if you say, I don't think I agree or something like that, it's not going to land.
Boring. But the one who's going to be like, you're such a bad racist, people like you must go back to Europe. the way our brains are set up, that's the one that gives you the most emotional reaction,
And the
then you
algorithm,
respond, and the algorithm
boosts
loves
that.
those.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. After saying that, the danger of what the platforms have become, therapy, alternative views, throwing a stone at an influential person just to get the algorithm going. There's the other part where Black South Africans, I'll speak about Black South Africans, suffer from cognitive dissonance, where foreigners must go. Abahambe. And then after tweeting that, I go to a Pakistani spaza shop and I buy a loaf of bread. White people must go back to Europe. It's white monopoly capital. And then tomorrow I'm sending my CV to a white-owned business and I'm really hoping for a job. There's this thing that people are struggling with within themselves. And for black people in particular, there's a struggle black people are not willing to go through. And this is one of the things I raise a lot, and I normally catch a lot of heat for this. Black people struggle with, Black South Africans, with what we're speaking about, they struggle with this lack of accountability when it comes to solving their own problems. These schools are not great, government is doing this, and then someone will show Curo, academia, what, and it's like, but you guys, black people, will take your money, give it to the church. You'll take your money, go drink alcohol at a shebeen. Take your money, go gamble on sports. Take your money and go buy expensive branded clothing. When we're saying please invest in your child's school so that it can be a Paul Roos, a Great Bloom, a JP, a King Edward, a Maritzburg College, all of a sudden you don't have money. And then you want to blame everyone else. It was apartheid, it was whatever. Some of your churches look amazing. Why can you not take that formula and put it to your schools? So there's this struggle that people have where they'd rather scream, vent, bash someone. I think it makes them feel good, but they refuse to actually take the act. And they have these clashing ideals. My social media profile, persona, is very different from who I am in real life.
There's a Kenyan philosopher, Ali Mazrai, who said that the problem with Africa is that Africa took the wrong lessons from the West. He said Africa took the consumerism, but Africa didn't take the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good... Do you agree with that statement?
It's very fair. Human beings generally love seeing the outcome and not the process. You want to see the guy with the pictures with the big muscles. You want to see the pretty girl, but you don't want to see the work. This pretty girl wakes up at 5 every morning, she jogs. This guy, every evening before he sleeps, he's pushing weights. Even the Springboks, we see them lift trophies. Not many people watch them practice. Not many people see them at the gym. Not many people see them in the doctor's office when they are limping, when they're injured, when they're getting stitches. And that's what it takes. So from an African perspective, or from a human perspective largely, we love seeing the outcome and we go for the surface level stuff. That's why I'd rather take my child, if I have a little bit of money, to a top school instead of actually building like a worse school into something great and going through the struggle of developing this thing. We always look for shortcuts, and at least the black story or the African story for me is a story of leadership. When I look at all the races and nations around the world, the Chinese, the Indians, the Europeans, the Americans, the Afrikaners, Jewish communities, Muslim communities, the one thing I find is the leadership is the difference. Because when you meet ordinary people at the bottom, they're all mostly the same, but they work within systems that have been built by leaders that actually were visionary and that were strict. The other thing I'll add, and maybe this is where we'll blame apartheid and colonialism to some degree. I must blame white people some way on the platform. Building strong families. So when the British colonizers came here, they came up with this, they brought this concept of money and a hut tax. So black men were taken from their homes to work in the mines, and that was the beginning of the breaking of the black family. Maybe they could have fought back, stayed with their family. Maybe even today we should be working harder. But the bottom line is black families are broken. And the other thing you see outside of good leadership with a lot of the other groups and nations is strong families. And I think outside of social media and all the things we complain about and politics, if black South Africans, black Africans, black people across the world were to be like, I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting one struggle. I'm not going to fight politically. I'm not going to fight in terms of the economy. I'm not going to fight spiritually for African spirituality. I'm just going to fight to have a strong family unit. I think if you could have that going, it would be a huge game changer. But again, the excuses are what we're more addicted to as people.
So that's a good example of a topic where there are contradictory narratives. So you could, well, it might be controversial to say that the problem of family breakdown is a bigger problem in black communities than white communities, but that is just statistically accurate. If you look at, for example, single-parent households and so forth. So it's not supposed to be controversial to say that this is a problem in black communities, although a lot of people see it that way. But you can look at that, if you are in that community, you can say, well, the reason why this is a problem is because of apartheid and all of that, so it's you guys that should be to blame. And you can stand outside of that community and say, well, this is a culture problem. You must sort yourselves out. Yeah. And so what we have at the end of the day is everyone agrees that there's a problem, but everyone's pointing fingers while the actual question is, how do we fix the problem?
100%.
But so what I like about this conversation, and just to get back to the social media element of it, and I think also why I think podcasts are so important and becoming increasingly important as opposed to what you could call the traditional media approach. I mean, I don't know how many interviews I've done in my life, but they tend to be very confrontational. And so, and unfortunately, I have to say a lot of journalists, or especially journalists, are doing this, where it's almost as if they are baiting, sort of trying to, I don't know if they're playing to the audience or playing to the news editor, and then they would sort of run the narrative, and, you know, and so me coming in talking about let's say land reform, then there would be this very vicious accusation. Well, you guys this and this, and then the reaction on my side is you immediately go into defense mode. And so even when your opponent, when it becomes a debate, even when your opponent makes a good point, you would not concede to that.
Sure.
You would look for the weak point and then hit on that. Yes, exactly.
It's like the algorithm on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think this is what's great about podcasting and a conversation like this. And I mentioned the other conversation I had the other day, is when two people can sit down and talk about problems like these, and also be and sort of let the guardrails down, and also be open about what you think ought to be looked into in your own community. Then suddenly it becomes a communal conversation looking for mutual ground. And so I think this is why I agree with you. Social media is important, and I think it's been very good for a lot of reasons. X has its challenges, but it's also an important platform. But I really think this is why podcasting is becoming increasingly important. Sure. But the question then linked to that is what's happening with the media. Do you think the media as we know it is going to survive? Or what do you think the future of media would look like?
I can only speculate. Very early when I got into podcasting, a lot of people were speaking about the death of mainstream media. Newspapers, radio, television. I think even recently, multi-choice DSTV was struggling. They might be selling to Canal Plus in France, I'm not sure. Patrice Motsepe might be involved in that deal. Newspapers are not doing well. They've retrenched, they've downscaled their staff and where they operate from, etc. So it looked like the death of mainstream media. At a time, I wanted to have a conversation about collaboration and mainstream media not being arrogant and listening and saying, look, you're meant to be the voice of the people. People want to hear from you. People's ears and eyes are somewhere else. They're with podcasting. Why are you not being more inclusive? But now when you're working with dinosaurs and archaic mindsets, they want to take what you claim as the new thing and they want to force fit it into what they have. Because mainstream media has the infrastructure. They've got the budgets. They've got all these things that would benefit. They just need to change the culture of conversations versus hard-hitting interviews where you're actually just attacking someone and looking for sound bites and a headline. They're still being difficult. I thought we could collaborate. I'm not sure where it's going, but the world is constantly evolving and I can't change it and other people can't change it. I do see mainstream struggling moving forward. because they still refuse to change.
Yep.
Same way the ANC went to 40%. It's the fall of the Roman Empire. Anyone who is so arrogant that they don't want to listen to anyone and they're not willing to change something. I mean, you are proudly Afrikaans man. We're here speaking English. If you aggressively was like, I will never speak English no matter what, this is not my taal, this is what my grandfather would roll in his grave, you can't now move with the times and maybe win people over to actually start speaking Afrikaans. The people that are always aggressively arrogant, including mainstream media, kill themselves. I think that's what that's what I speculate. And then there's going to be a rise of podcasts. And the sad thing that I'm seeing as it stands is a lot of mainstream media companies and individuals are trying to run into podcasting because it looks like the new in thing, but they're copying the same model and podcasting and no one's watching their stuff. And it's like, people want something new. You can't keep bringing the old stuff and just because it's on YouTube, think. It doesn't work like that. People want something fresh. It's the reason we want it behind the scenes, even with some of our celebrities. We just want to see more. It can't just be that you're just going to argue. Yes, you'll have a TikTok clip with the sound bite, but I want to go and watch the whole thing and hear the context. I want to see what this person's about. I'm a deeper human being. I'm not binary. I'm not one-dimensional. So give me more than just what you gave me. And mainstream media is not listening. So I think it's going to struggle.
Yeah, so I for one, I'm certainly, this might be an unpopular view, but I certainly don't celebrate the fall of traditional media or the fall of journalism, because every platform or every media sphere has its own unique strengths and weaknesses and role to play. And the great thing about journalism and why we need more of it is the phenomenon, among others, of investigative journalism. Podcasters aren't investigative journalists. No. And you need to have the journalist who goes to Lutuli House or Parliament or the Union Buildings or wherever, who looks for stuff, who goes through the documents and who discovers certain things that the public needs to know. And if the media, as we know it, collapses, we're going to lose that as well. So we're going to have sort of a superficial transparency because people are going to be open, they're going to talk on social media, but the gap between what people ought to know and what they actually know, I think is going to get bigger. And so what annoys me about what's happening in, again, obviously not everywhere, but in much of the traditional media or the legacy media, as a lot of people call it, is people then they have this incredibly important role to play, but then they color it ideologically, and it becomes more of an ideological pursuit, and you have to toe the line. What does my funder or my news editor say? And this is the policy position of our media institution, and so these journalists are more keen, many of them, to become activists or to become celebrity journalists, and then the whole phenomenon loses its credibility.
It's very sad. I enjoyed journalism for reporting more than anything. People that are out there just getting the story. No opinion, no ideologies, no something happened there, this is what they said, and we're just sending it out there. In terms of investigative journalists, I think a lot of them have dropped the ball, which is why people also don't like them as much. There's an amazing American guy called Johnny Harris who does some level of investigative journalism. There's James Yanni, I think is his name. There's going to be a rise of kids, other people who are curious, who are willing to go out there. You've got the Wide Awake podcast, Josh Rubin, who's gone into like the Cape Flats and sat with like guys that are in the drug world and gangs. Those are forms of investigative journalism. It's not sensational, and sometimes you're getting the thing from the horse's mouth sitting like this. Yes, it's going to be saturated because anyone with a cell phone or anyone with a camera can interview. But again, if investigative journalists, if the reporters are not going to pull up their socks and understand that things are changing and remain arrogant, that this is how we've always done things, I need a budget to go to, it's not going to work, because they've also lost credibility. A lot of them will go and investigate, they'll read reports, they'll send it out there, then I'll come and sit with you. It's like, but you told us that these guys are racist. You told us that Orania hates black people. So then I end up looking like an investigative journalist, like, but where were the real...
I wanted to ask you about that, because that was almost a form of investigative journalism that you did. So tell me about that trip, because everyone spoke about that, and it had, I don't know how many views your documentary had, but it was very popular. Why did you go to Orania and what did you find?
I was trying to buy land in Orania. I'm coming. I'm fascinated by leaders, all leaders, including so-called bad ones. I know people think of certain names. Maybe I'll throw them. The algorithm should be fine. Robert Mugabe, Adolf Hitler, Stalin, these
Mussolini,
guys. There's something about them that clearly got a lot of people to buy into what they were selling. Bushiri, the pastor. So I'm always fascinated by leaders, and I'm fascinated by people that get things done. And part of it was this Orania project, which was deemed controversial. They're trying to build a mini Israel for Afrikaners, what there. And I've done a lot of research myself, just out of curiosity, and it was never what I thought it was. Some of the things that have been, if you actually go research there for years, is Zuma's visited there, Julius Malema's visited there, I think Thabo Mbeki, like these people have visited there. Nelson Mandela's visited there, and it's like, that's not a secret. You can go research, no black people are allowed. Part of why you go there is to see for yourself and also just to learn. One of my wishes, which hasn't happened as yet, by the way, I'm constantly disappointed. So you guys must kind of help me. I'd love to sit with like real white racists that absolutely hate black people, so that I can figure out, what is it? Is it experiences? Is it crime that they've experienced? Something's happened at home, so that I can see where this comes from. Because you may find a lot of truth in what they're saying. You may find a lot of biased opinion in what they're saying, and that's where we learn. Maybe we help them get over whatever it is that they have. You go there and so many things were dispelled. Number one, I thought Orania was like a stained city. There's this big wall around it. You have to get to the gate. Who are you coming to visit? Yeah, you're straight home. Then they call him. Then he comes to fetch me at the gate. There's no fence. There's no gate. And this propaganda out there where black people think, how did they allow you into Orania? I'm like, how did they allow you into Joburg? You drove in through the highway. It's been said so many times, but many people not understand. Orania is in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's in the middle of nowhere. Black people want to go there, white people that want to go there, they go there and they're like, yeah, this was lekker, but I don't think I'm going back, it's far. The amount of white Afrikaans, white English people that send me messages, DMs, thanking me. They're like, look, you're a black guy, but geez, as a white person, I thought maybe there's some crazy people there. I thought, you know, an English guy won't be allowed there. Even as an Afrikaner, I was like, yeah, I don't think these are... They themselves are buying into this propaganda that's not true. So you go there, you look at the work they've done, you listen to the history, you listen to the vision, and then you let the people tell themselves. This is not me being like, hey guys, I went to Orania, I did the research I found, which is investigative journalist. I went there and I literally met the guys and I'm like, hey, chat to the people. Now, I didn't get to do a full documentary, but we've got a lot of footage. I don't know if the team at some point will put a documentary together where we were filming the school, filming the Verwoerd Museum, filming the town, filming the people working. To be like, these are normal people that just have a different vision to you. And it just so happened that someone has been using it for their own propaganda. You may disagree with them. You may have issues with them. One of the questions I asked you is straight on. I may have asked Karel Boshoff as well, is, are the people of Orania racist? And very honestly, they were like, look, we can't lie and pretend like there aren't racist people here. Definitely. There are racist people everywhere. But we didn't build this thing out of racism and hating other people. We were trying to do for our people, and you're like, but this sounds noble. And when you speak to black people that have watched that, a lot of them watched it out of anger because they were ready with their phones to type and be like, yeah, this is why we must go and destroy. And they sat there and they kept, wow, okay. And they were like, it's not what I thought it was. And I'm like, this is where mainstream traditional has failed the people. Because this is something that everyone should know. If the people that were entrusted with sharing information, knowledge, showing us spaces. I mean, you'll take us to Santorini, Greece and show us the beauty, but you can't show us South Africa and be like, the place you're speaking about, here it is. Here's, I mean, what Josh is doing in Cape Town. This is the Cape Flats. These are the guys. Why are you selling drugs? Hey, my bro, you know, I've got nothing else to do, bro, so I have to. But why don't you just, I wasn't good at school. I'm not an amazing rugby player. I'm not a super athlete.
And then suddenly you
I
start
don't have a
getting
rich family.
the context.
But I have children like you. They also need to eat. Tell me what I must do. If you get retrenched tomorrow, you're not getting a tender, you don't play for the Springboks, you don't play for Bafana Bafana, and your kids are hungry, and they say, Pa, ons is honger. What are you going to do? And you're like, no, you have to do something. We did something. And this was the something we did, and this is why we're here now. So then someone hears that, and they're like, hey, this sounds like a normal human being who was just in a tough position. And then it became a culture. Now they can't get out of it. And then we learn, and when we're trying to fix society, if that's what we claim we're doing, we now have real data from people inside telling us the story, and it's not some newspaper headline. And look, my last point on traditional media is because they see that they're dwindling, some of the articles they release these days are literally tabloid. Literally. There was a story recently. Was it Times Live, News 24? There was a story recently that was so ridiculous. Everyone was bashing it. I saw Ernst van Sail posted about it.
Wasn't it the Jan Braai story?
The Jan Braai story that he wasn't serving.
It's like a 5-second clip where he was giving a hot dog to a white woman, I think, and there was a black guy, I think, next to her.
That was so sad.
And it's like a 5-second clip, and then they say he refuses to give hot dogs to black people.
So again, traditional media versus social media. A kid is out there with their phone recording the exact same thing. So when someone says, yeah, the white people did this, and the kid's like, I've got a video from there, you guys are lying. It's like, but you guys are meant to be the traditional vetted, you know, you report to a regulator. But a kid came and said, you guys are lying. I've got footage as well with my cell phone. You guys have got these big expensive cameras. I'm sitting with the guy and they're like, no one violated us. They're lying. They took our money and they said they'll help us, but nothing came of it. You know that story of AfriForum having to help the Meyiwa family?
Oh, Senzo Meyiwa,
You're
yes.
like, you've got an entire government run by the ANC, you've got all these black political parties, you've got the trade unions, you've got the football clubs, you've got all these people, you've got the churches that are meant to be helping, and it took a so-called racist white Afrikaner organization to be like, here's an icon in South Africa, a captain of a national team, Bafana, can we help? And you're like, this is silly. This is actually silly. And I think for me, social media starts becoming that, at least from reporting opinions, and it's very dangerous. But what we're seeing with people is they have some way to vet. You actually build some type of credibility over time where they're like, I don't like this Penuel guy. I don't like him at all. But I know if he went to Oranje and he said, guys, it's racist, the people, they try to hurt me, I believe him. I don't like him. He annoys me, but I believe him, versus this journalist who works for this organization where the editor was the one that said, go run the story. Yeah.
So to get back to this question of whether the Rainbow Nation could work, there are some issues in South Africa that have become so polarizing and controversial, where it's very difficult to have a conversation about it. And then you also get the extremes on each side trying to sort of to frame the narrative in a particular way. And one is land reform, and EWC and all of this. And so I think on the one extreme, you hear people saying things like, well, there were no injustices in South Africa's past, everything, all of these problems should be blamed on the black people or whatever.
Yes,
you get some of that.
It's the ANC government and corruption.
Yeah. There's no historical dynamic to it.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the argument is the other extreme, that nothing should be blamed on, or, the current government has no responsibility, and all of that. But so my question is, how do we deal with a topic as controversial as that?
South Africans are, and I normally get bashed for this, and they're not unique, sorry. South Africans are like children. South Africans, the majority of them are like children. The problem we have in this country is we don't have good, strong, firm parents for the people that are telling them the things that parents need to tell them. Stop playing outside, come do your maths homework. Stop watching TV, go practice sports or whatever it is that you're doing. We don't have that. Your child complains, you're like, it's the neighbors. Your child is failing at school, you're like, it must be the teacher. Your child is not making the team, you're like, there's racism. We don't have strong parents. The land issue in this country, and I've made an entire video on it, on the Penuels show, it's now called Convo, trying to address it from history, speaking about land just generally, all the way back to the Roman, Mongolian, Ottoman empires, to what land is supposed to be, and the land issue in this country, as much as it's economic, is very much a skills issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll chase away all white people, all of them. Guys must all go back to Europe or go to Australia or Canada. And then we'll be here with the land, and then now what? And that's where we use like a Zimbabwe as a case study. But you don't have to go to Zimbabwe. Here in South Africa, you can go to homelands, you can go to villages that were thriving, and you see all the people that have left to the cities. You don't have to go far. In the same breath, you look at a place like Orania, which was sort of desert, where now people have built something. You look at Waterfall City. There's the story of Dubai.
Mm.
You need people to have skills, which our government and whoever they work with, they're not serious about giving people skills. Just teaching a child how to plant potatoes. Just something as silly as that. I have matric. How do you plant a potato? Back Vietnam. You have matric. You know how to build a little house. I didn't study construction. And you're like, to build a little house. So we don't have skills for basic things. And then we need capital. Capital is not necessarily money, even though people say it's money. Capital is resources, access to clay, to certain minerals, to tools that you can use to build, etc. If you can get that right, if you can have a population that is skilled and that has access to resources, black people will never have to ask for the land. They will acquire land on their own. They will get white people who beg them. I have a farm, I've got land sitting, it's doing nothing. Please, I hear you're the best maize farmer. I hear you're brilliant at building structures. Please come build on my property. And you're like, I'm coming. And you'll build. That's why some of the white South Africans, but there's increasingly, I'm learning of a lot, more black, colored and Indian, they are desired in the Middle East, in Asia, in Canada, because they have skills that other countries can see are valuable. And in this country, our government and big business and other people that are gatekeeping, they don't want to use those people to develop. And then again, it becomes political propaganda. You're living in a squatter camp, it's white people's fault, but you left 100 hectares of farmland at home because you're like, well, there's no infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't fall from the sky, you build it. You go to the city if you need to, you work a little bit so that you send home hammers, you send home an axe, you send home some materials, you buy some cement, and you build something. So the land issue is very much a skills and capital in inverted commas conversation. The other things are problematic, but I can tell you now, if you focus on these things, the policies and Penuel gets 500 hectares of land, but I've got no skills and no capital, I'm going to sell that land tomorrow, which has happened to most of the land that has been given to people. They ended up selling it or they opted for money. We see this all the time. We're in a small room here, for people that may not know. In this small room, we can podcast and maybe make 1,000 rand. The next person will open a call center and put 10 people in here and make 50,000 rand a month. The next person will open an asset management company and manage 100 million where people are trading every day. The next person will be like, this is a small piece of land. Maybe I'll plant cabbage and make 200 rand a month. So it's really about what you do with what you have. But that's education, skills, resources. That's how we solve the land issue. But to what you were saying, also understanding history and not stopping the history at apartheid or stopping the history at British colonization. Do an in-depth. What is land? What has land always been? What were Africans doing with land? What can you do with land today? Is it farming, property development, tourism, IT, podcasting? Be creative, go wild, and travel. Travel to different places where land is being used constructively. Borrow some of those ideas, go back to wherever you come from, and then try some of those things. And then it will get sorted. There's a nice term that I heard from some of the political candidates leading up to the elections. They were speaking about spatial injustice, more especially the townships, and part of the problems being that the taxi industry relies on black people living in townships. If black people stop living in townships, the taxi industry would largely collapse. They kind of need that apartheid legacy to keep black people there and working here. So we need to fix spatial injustice so that we can have the infrastructure which is focused on farming, manufacturing, mining, building, and then exporting. And having speed trains, building our own ships, building our own aeroplanes so that we can actually become a first world nation.
Yeah, and in many ways, like you said, it starts with something small. Like taking care of your family
Yeah.
or starting a vegetable garden or something like that.
Yeah.
Penuel, thank you very much. Great discussion.
I just want to say congrats. I heard you got a bump up. You were working in the little spaza shop called AfriForum and you've been pumped up to Solidarity. Congrats. And yeah, wishing you and the family and the rest of the team the best of luck with the Pioneer podcast. Thank you to Dion, Gerard, Marie-Louise and the whole team.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Streets. If you support this podcast and the work that we are involved with as the Afrikaner Foundation and the broader solidarity movement in South Africa, I want to encourage you to become a more active supporter. You can do this first and foremost by subscribing to our various social media channels, by leaving a comment and sharing what you have seen. But other than that, also by making a small monthly contribution to the work that we are doing through the Afrikaner Foundation's website or by making a once-off donation. Links in the description.